Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to this Adda today. It's always great to have you with us. And you all know that TESOL Society of Bangladesh started its journey in 2014. And since then, we have been organizing webinars, academic Addas, and other sessions. Well, today this is our third academic Adda. Well, I must say it's more an Adda with a cup of tea or coffee. So definitely I'd like to invite you all to this special Adda with tea or coffee so that we can enjoy our time in a true sense. Well, today's academic Adda is on teacher voices, creating participatory spaces in educational research. We understand that this is a very significant topic, and we have a wonderful scholar with us today, our dear Madam Taslima Ivy. Well, I know that personally, most of us know her, but still, for a formal introduction, I should say that she is a PhD student at Manchester Institute of Education, University of Manchester, and is particularly interested in the use of ICTs in education in developing countries. She had previously completed MA in Educational Technology and TESOL from the University of Manchester, which is where her interest in this area took shape. Her thesis aims to explore primary school teachers' lived experiences of using multimedia for teaching in a remote island, Hapia, Bangladesh, to understand how the meaning of ICTs are shaped by social, cultural, political forces in context. The research is based on case studies of motivated teachers who have opted to use technology as a result of the government's aim to digitalize and transform education through establishing multimedia classrooms across the country. She will also be exploring how this political language of the digital is becoming a socio-cultural language of resistance. Well, prior to her PhD studies, she had been working in Bangladesh as an assistant professor at the Department of English, University of Dhaka. Well, please welcome Madam Taslima Ivy, who has been eagerly waiting since 7:45 with her presentation. But before Madam starts, I would like to request our president, the president of TESOL Society of Bangladesh, to say something regarding our association and particularly about this program. So please welcome Professor Saidur Rahman, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. আমি একটু আড্ডার মুডে চলে যাই। আমাদের ইন্ট্রোডাকশন থেকে আমার কাছে মনে হয় যে আড্ডার একটা ইন্টিমেট ভাষা হচ্ছে আমাদের মাতৃভাষা, এবং আড্ডার পুরো আইডিয়াটা আমরা যখন করি তখন আমরা একটু চেষ্টা করেছিলাম যে আমরা একটা চায়ের আড্ডার মতো বা আমাদের বাঙালি সংস্কৃতির যে একটা অংশ আছে যেটাকে আমরা বৈঠকখানার আড্ডাও বলি, এবং এই আড্ডার যে একটা সংস্কৃতি যেটা আমরা গ্র্যাজুয়ালি হারিয়ে যাচ্ছে, মানে এই যে একটা টি স্টলে আড্ডা বা চায়ের কাপে গল্প করা, এবং এটা হচ্ছে আমার কাছে প্রায় মনে হয়েছে বাঙালি সত্তার একটা এসেনশিয়াল একটা অংশ আর কি। এবং এই যে অবসর সময়ে আমরা একটা ইন্টেলেকচুয়াল ডিসকাশন করি এবং আমরা ইনফ্যাক্ট গসিপ করি, ইনফ্যাক্ট আমরা আমার কাছে মনে হয় স্মল টক করি, রিউমার, এগুলি আসলে আমাদের একদম সত্তার ভিতরে আছে। আমরা দীর্ঘদিন ধরে খেয়াল করলাম যে আমরা যে একাডেমিক ডিসকাশন গুলো করি, ভেরি ফর্মাল লুক, যেটা অনেক ক্ষেত্রে আমাদের যে একটা আমেজ আছে, আমরা যে এক কাপ চা নিয়ে গল্প করতে করতে আমাদের মধ্যে যে আমেজটা তৈরি হয়, আমরা যে ব্রেন স্টর্ম করি, আমরা অনেক আলোচনা করি, সেই জায়গাটা আমার কাছে মনে হয় যে একটা ফ্রেমওয়ার্ক আছে, ওয়েস্টার্ন ফ্রেমওয়ার্ক, যেখানে আমরা খুব ফর্মালি হয়তো চেষ্টা করি একটা প্রেজেন্টেশন ইত্যাদি দেওয়ার, সেটা থেকে আমাদের চায়ের আড্ডার ব্যাপারটা অনেক কমফোর্টেবল। ওই আইডিয়া থেকে আমরা দুটো পাশাপাশি কনসেপ্টে এখন পর্যন্ত আমাদের অ্যাসোসিয়েশনটা রান করছি। একটা হচ্ছে ওয়েবিনার, যেটা একটা সেমিনার স্টাইলে হচ্ছে, যেটা ভার্চুয়াল, এবং এটার পাশাপাশি আমরা একাডেমি আড্ডাটা শুরু করলাম। আমরা একাডেমি আড্ডা প্রথমটা শুরু করেছি কেমব্রিজ ইউনিভার্সিটি, আমাদের মঞ্জুরুল আবেদিনকে দিয়ে অ্যাসেসমেন্ট দিয়ে শুরু করেছিলাম। পরবর্তীতে আমরা ব্যাক টু স্কুল প্রিপেয়ারনেস, আমাদের দ্বিতীয়টা ছিল যে আমরা উই আর প্ল্যানিং টু গো ব্যাক, এবং ফিজিক্যাল ক্লাসরুম, আর উই রিয়েলি প্রিপেয়ার। এরপরে আমরা আসলাম এই নাম্বার 3। তাসলিমা আইভির পরিচয় অলরেডি আফরোজা একটা টিনে দিয়ে দিয়েছে। তাসলিমা আইভির সাথে আমার পরিচয় অনেক পুরনো, আমরা একসাথে অনেক আগে প্রেসিডেন্সি ইউনিভার্সিটিতে একসাথে চাকরি করেছি। I had great opportunity to know her, এবং টাইম টু টাইম আমাদের যোগাযোগ আছে, এখনো আমি মাঝে মাঝেই বিভিন্ন ইস্যু নিয়ে ডিসকাশন হয়, এবং আমাদের এই অ্যাসোসিয়েশন বিভিন্ন অ্যাক্টিভিটিস ওর সাথে শেয়ার করেছিলাম, এবং আই রিকোয়েস্টেড হার যে আমাদের জন্য একটা উনি যে বিষয় নিয়ে রিসার্চ করছে এবং ওনার যে আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং, সেই জায়গা থেকে আমাদের সাথে তার যে নলেজ এবং এই ব্যাপারটা আমাদের সাথে একটু শেয়ার করবে। সো আমি রিয়েলি গ্ল্যাড যে খুবই ব্যস্ততার মধ্যেও রাজি হচ্ছে, কারণ some of you know যে she's about to complete her PhD. এই টাইমে আমি কারোর সাথে কথাও বলি নাই। PhD এর এই লাস্ট 1 year I remember জমা দেওয়ার আগে I didn't know anybody. কারোর সাথে গল্প করার সময় নাই, কথা বলার সময় নাই। এরকম একটা সময়ে আমাদের চায়ের আড্ডা এসেছে, এবং সেটার জন্য আমি তাসলিমা আইভিকে অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ। আর আরো একটা ব্যাপার আছে, তাসলিমা আইভির সাথে আমার ফ্র্যাটার্নিটিতে আমরা বিশাল একটা বন্ডিং আছে। আমরা মাঝে মাঝে বলি এই বন্ডিংটা স্ট্রঙ্গার দ্যান ফ্যামিলি বন্ডিং। ক্যাডেট কলেজ সামহাউ রেসিডেন্সিয়াল কালচার থেকে আমরা আসাতে আমাদের বিভিন্ন বিপদ আপদ বিভিন্ন জায়গায় শেয়ার হয়। সো সেই জায়গায় আমাদের শি ইজ লাইক মাই সিস্টার, যেটা আই এম প্রাউড টু সে যে শি ইজ মাই ইয়াঙ্গার সিস্টার। সো আর গল্প না করে এখন সরাসরি আমরা তাসলিমা আইভিকে দেই, এবং ইন বিটুইন আমাদের এই ডিসকাশন প্রেজেন্টেশনের মাঝখানে আমরা গল্প করব, এবং সবাইকে বলবো যে প্লিজ ফিল কমফোর্টেবল। You don't really need to ask question in English. You don't really need to do that. আমরা চাচ্ছি যে সবাই মজা করে একটা গল্প করি, আমরা শিখি। কারণ আইভি যে ব্যাপারটা নিয়ে আজকে প্রেজেন্ট করছে, স্পেশালি টিচার্স ভয়েসেস, আমি এটাকে অনেক সময় বলি আনহার্ড ভয়েসেস। টিচারের ভয়েসগুলো বেশি শোনা যায় না, পেরিফেরি যে টিচার আছে, এবং ক্রিয়েটিং পার্টিসিপেটরি স্পেস ইন এডুকেশনাল রিসার্চ ইজ ভেরি ইম্পর্টেন্ট। সেই জায়গাটাতে অনেক কিছু শেখার আছে। তো আমি এখন একটু তাসলিমা আইভিকে একটু রিকোয়েস্ট করছি টু স্টার্ট our discussion and presentation.
So thank you very much, Said Bhai, for that flattering introduction. Thank you very much, Tina, too, for such a wonderful introduction, which I don't think I quite deserve. But I'd like to thank everyone here today for giving their time and effort, and I really look forward to joining in a conversation, or as Said Bhai was saying, like this Adda with you. So if you bear with me for just 1 minute, I'll share my PowerPoint with you. As everyone knows, or as I've been introduced, I'm going to be talking about creating participatory spaces in educational research, and actually what that meant and how that contributed to my research over here. Before starting, just very roughly, there's going to be 3 parts to my discussion today. 2 of the parts are about the methods that I used. So one is called multimodal artifact production. The second is exactly what Said Bhai was saying, and I used it as a method in my research that's called Golpo, that we all know about and I so passionately believe in. And in the third section, I'm going to show some concrete examples of what that did to my research. So the kind of data that it produced, what I found, what I learned along the way, how it worked, how it didn't work. So that's roughly my idea for today. And as Said Bhai said, I might be stopping in the middle to ask you to join my conversation, and I'd really like to hear your opinions, your ideas about how we can take this forward in our context and what you think about it. Because up until now, I've been working on this by myself, and I feel very fortunate today that I have all of these people from my culture, my context, who can actually give me opinions and suggestions and can help me along my journey in my understanding of participatory spaces. So very briefly about my research, as has been introduced, my research is about teachers' lived experiences of using technology, specifically in rural areas and in the context of digital Bangladesh. So we all know, and we've all heard over the past years, a lot about digital Bangladesh. It's the government's vision of where Bangladesh should be by 2021. And it's a developmental vision. And what the government thinks is that we should be improving ourselves by using technology. So the digital is the main force of this whole discourse. And within this project, within this vision, the government has tried to digitalize each and every sector. So the judiciary, the health sector, the emergency sector, citizens' right to data and emergency. So that was kind of what they went for. So when they were digitalizing all of these sectors, the government thought they want to digitalize the education sector too. Now, this was back in 2010. And in line with their vision of using technology to become more developed, they conceived of this project called the Multimedia Classroom Project. So this was supervised by a government division called A2I, Access to Information. And under this project, what they did is they wanted to establish an infrastructure throughout the country, specifically in rural areas, what they were calling multimedia classrooms. And by a multimedia classroom, what they meant is the teachers will have a projector, they will have a laptop, and they will project PowerPoints in the classroom. And to go a bit more deeper, their rationale for this was like, if the teachers can bring in songs, animations, videos, images into the classroom, that might make the classrooms more interesting than the ones that we have. That might promote more active participation, because students will be feeling more integrated and more interested in what the teachers have to say rather than using only the textbook. So that was A2I's rationale for this multimedia classroom project. But the project doesn't stop here. What they also did is they created this e-portal that they called Shikkok Batayon. Now, Batayon was a space where teachers are supposed to upload PowerPoints, the PowerPoints that they create for their classrooms, and they can also download PowerPoints that other teachers have made. Teachers were given extensive training. It was a 14-day training on how to create PowerPoints. And in relation to that collaboration and co-creation that is supposed to happen here, the government also did something that they called a gamification scheme. Now, a gamification is a kind of competition that they floated, and on the basis of that, what they were basically doing is selecting the best teacher based on the quality of the content. So if you look here, there's the best teacher of the week, who is always like there at the center, and everyone can look at the teacher and everyone can know which teachers are contributing the most. In line with that gamification and in their attempt to create a more motivation into teachers, they created all these district level, national level competitions. So what teachers would do, they would take part in these competitions. The teachers who did really good, who produced these quality contents, they would be awarded at a national level, at a district level. And then there were these leadership roles created. So teachers could become mentors here on Shikkok Batayon, and they could mentor each and other teachers in creating their PowerPoints. And they could also become district ambassadors. So that this whole thing was in place. And A2I's story regarding this was that they have been able to create a lot of motivation. And that intrigued me. Like, what was happening here? Why were teachers using technology a lot? And one of the things A2I constantly promote is that 80% of the work that's going on here in Shikkok Batayon is from the rural teachers. And they also say that the winners of the national competitions are mostly rural teachers, even from places like Hapia. And that really, really intrigued me. I thought to myself, like, why is this happening? What might technology mean to these teachers? So I wanted to look into these, and that's how I was pushed into my project or PhD project. I wanted an answer, and I wanted to understand their experiences. That's very briefly about the research that I'm doing. Now I'd like to share a bit about my story. Why did I choose participatory spaces? Why did I go into multimodal artifact production? So the how and the why of my methodology. Now, this has a personal story, and this also has an academic story to it. My personal story started when I was doing a qualitative research training here as a PhD student. So we were practicing all of the methods that we were being taught and trained in. So one of the methods is called photo elicitation, where we are supposed to share images and see how it feels, or if it's right for my PhD or my method and everything. So I was practicing this with another PhD student, and her research was about identity. And she told me, okay, Ivy, can you go back and can you produce 10 pictures about which answer the question, who am I? So now I thought, okay, that's going to be really interesting. I was really, really excited about it. I came back, I was like, okay, I'm going to take pictures, I'm going to send them to her. I was very motivated. And to my surprise, along the next 7 days, I couldn't send a single picture for various reasons. For instance, when I was thinking about who am I, the most basic fundamental thing that defines me is I'm a mother, my relationship with my daughter. And I didn't want to send a picture of my daughter over to a researcher. I just didn't. Who am I? My parents shaped me fundamentally into becoming who I was. They defined me. I didn't have a single picture of my parents with me. I couldn't send that. Who am I? I had these very, very deeply emotional experiences in my life that shaped me into who I was. But I'd never share images. I don't have images. If I had images, I'd never share them. They're too personal. They're too emotional. They're too painful, maybe. So I was thinking, like, I don't have the space. Only if I would have some sort of space, I could express myself in some other way, maybe by writing a diary, maybe through a quote. So yes, for some things, images worked, but for other things that I wanted to tell the researcher about myself, images didn't quite cut it. And that led me thinking to, how can I create a more open space for my participants in my research? I don't want to impose any limitations on them. And that led me to exploring different kinds of methods that are participatory and that basically work with creating spaces in your research. And I found multimodal artifact production. So these are academic definitions, which I really don't want to go through. Basically, multimodal artifact production is where we agree on 2 or 3 themes with our participants and ask them to express themselves in response to those themes in any mode or medium that they prefer. So for instance, I asked my participants that, can you portray your experiences or your significant experiences of being a multimedia teacher in any mode or medium that you like? You'll send me your significant experiences every 15 days. And you'll send me what your understanding about multimedia. What is multimedia to you every 15 days? So those were the themes that we agreed on through discussion. And I explained you can use any mode or media that you like. I ended up having images, poetry, paintings, audio clips, video clips, reflective diaries, quotes, links, and PowerPoints. So for every teacher, it was a mix and match of different things through which they constructed their life or wanted to show me about their experiences and their life. Now, if you're interested in the academic side of this, that was my personal story. There's a bit of literature that supports using multimodality in research. So, and the person that really, or the academic that really shaped my understanding regarding multimodal participant-generated data is Sunderland. And what Sunderland argues, is that it has the ability to create counter stories. So sometimes there are these very general master narratives going on, circulating. If you can create a space by giving people a bit more agency in how they're expressing themselves, you might get insight into their perspectives. So you're not understanding or you're not reproducing authoritative voices, the voice of the researcher, which is me, but you're kind of trying to produce their voices, their perspectives through their preferred ways. And another thing Sunderland heavily argues is that if you impose a modal medium, it might just impose a limitation on how they're expressing themselves. So that's kind of a reflection of what happened to me with photo elicitation. And not only in terms of qualitative research in the area of social semiotics, visual anthropology, there's been a lot of discussion and understanding that says that as human beings, how we conceive ourselves, how we conceive of experiences, and then how we express ourselves is not always verbal. It's fundamentally multimodal. So we think multimodally, we conceptualize things multimodally, we might even express ourselves using different modes and mediums. So based on the academic discussion and my personal experience, I thought that, okay, multimodal data production is the way for me. And it kind of is really useful for my goal and aims and objectives of the research. So that is about one of the methods that I used for creating a participatory space. And the other method that I used was Golpo. So I'd like to take a bit of a break here. Saeed Bhai, are you with me?
Yes.
Yeah, because I've been talking for a very big amount of time. I want some interaction, and then I'd like to go on to the next.
Okay. I was just wondering, because I was part of one study. It was done by Save the Children as part of the A2I project. That was interactive multimedia digital device. That was actually for a long period of time. I think this is the third year going on, and then they've designed multimedia module for class 1 to 5 for English for children.
Yeah.
So I did a bit of monitoring and the evaluation, and then I submitted a report 2018, end of 18. So my idea from outsider's perspective, because I was an evaluator, so I was just thinking about teachers' acceptance about the use of technology in the classroom.
Yeah.
And then the perspective that came in my mind is ecological perspective, where teacher is the keystone in the keystone species in the ecological environment, where technology is something an outside thing, because our traditional method, that is we often talk about chalk and duster and the blackboard during our school days, which sometimes I still believe really worked for us. I don't know why it didn't work for others. And then somewhere I found that they were kind of forced to use technology, and there was a divide. Technology was creating a divide, a gap between the younger generation who are more willing to accept technology, which is an essential part. They understand that. But look at somebody who is very knowledgeable but incompetent to use technology. So they were in a big trouble, out of the league, and then kind of they don't know how to. So when, as a visitor, we started observing their classes, it took so much time for them to get adjusted, which gave us a hint that they were not using it properly, because they took so much time to look at the PowerPoint and other things, which possibly it was a staged classroom for us, kind of. So when we talk about the technological revolution, and when we understand that we need it, we understand there are benefits, are we also talking about other stories, other multimodal narrations of the teachers where we have
Yeah.
similar issues.
Yeah, absolutely. For instance, to talk about what you were saying, like that division between technology using teachers and non-technology using teachers. If I say like what I found in my research, one of the things was I found one of my themes in my research is that of positioning. So technology using teachers were positioning non-technology using teachers negatively. Non-technology using teachers were positioning technology using teachers negatively. And what I argue in my thesis is that technology was a tool of reproducing a social division. So technology, not only in my research, if we look at the overall academic research regarding technology, especially if you're looking into sociology of technology, technology has always been seen as a tool that reproduces existing power structures. So if there's a social divide, technology is going to increase that. If there's a gender divide, technology increases that. So if in a community, if women are already suppressed, if you bring in technology, it might act as a tool of even suppressing that even more. Technology is a tool that kind of reproduces that division between good students, poor students, and wealthy students. So wealthy students have all of these access to technology, internet, they have tutors to show them how to do it. So they're doing even better. Poor students do not have access to technology. They don't know how to use it, no one to guide them. They end up using games and other things, not for improving themselves. So what you said, technology is a tool to reproduce, first thing. And second thing, when I go into my examples, you'll see that I have both kinds of narratives. So the narratives that show teachers who are really, really interested, but I also have contrasting narratives that show that teachers who are really, I would say, like ended up in struggles and conflicts and contradictions. So yes, I have both kinds of narratives, and I'll show you today, like what I found.
I also liked the idea of dialogic process that you talk about.
Yeah.
Something I'm really eager to learn from you, multimodal semiotics. Beautiful way of looking at. I was just thinking about Bakhtin. I don't know whether the Mikhail. During my
I drawn Bakhtin too. I drawn Vygotsky and Bakhtin, so they're there heavily.
Exactly. Thank you so much. So we look forward.
Okay.
আমরা আবার গল্পে চলে আসবো. So
okay.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So I'll start from here. Again, thank you, Said Bhai. So that was one of the ways that I tried to create a participatory space. And the second of the ways, as I told you before, is Golpo. Now, again, why did I use Golpo? That again stems from one of my personal experiences while I was doing my qualitative training here. Now, this time we were practicing interviews, and I was supposed to practice a semi-structured interview with one of my colleagues. So he came over and he said, okay, he came over with his prompts, right? And he was asking me his prompts. And the tension that I felt there was that I was not being able to say what I wanted to say. So his vision of my experience was not my vision of my experience. So the prompts that he came with was not what I wanted to talk about at all. I wanted to talk about something very different. And because he needed to gather information regarding his prompts, he was kind of pushing me towards his interpretations and what he wanted to know. That made me feel very, very limited. And when I came back from that experience, I had my supervisory meeting and I said to my supervisors, okay, this semi-structured interview is not working for me. Me as a person, it doesn't work, and I'm not going to be able to connect with my participants. That's who I am. So then one of my supervisors said, okay, can you just sit back and think about when, or of an example of when you were able to connect the most at an emotional level without any inhibition, and you also enjoyed the process of connecting with someone. And I started thinking and reflecting, and I thought that, okay, I do that when I'm in a Golpo, like today, what we are doing. So when I'm in a Golpo situation, I have my cup of tea, I have that suspended sense of time and aim and objectives, and I know that I can say what I want,
that's the time when I mostly enjoy communicating with someone, expressing my opinions, saying what I want to say. And it clicked. Like, I want to use Golpo as a method for me and my participants. I think that would be far better than taking these structured, semi-structured question answer kind of format into the context. The problem for me then was I didn't find much literature that had used Golpo before, because this is something very contextual. This is something very cultural. I did a bit of digging here and there and found bits and pieces, not very substantial, but if someone is interested, there's some work by Chakravarti who defines Golpo. I'm not going over the definition because I'm sure that everyone here knows very well what it is, and everyone here might enjoy it as well. For me, what was very important was finding out that this format is distinctively different. And because it's distinctively different from any other culture, that's why I might have been feeling that sense of being limited, that sense of not being able to talk naturally the way that I want. And so I tried to find discursive features of Golpo, not much work that I found in the field of educational research. But there were some stylistic features which made me understand that, oh yes, it is something quite different. And why is it different from that question answer kind of spaces into methods, or methods that have an aim and a fixed time? So one of the stylistic features is there's lots of overlapping. So the floor is taken at a point where the listener feels that she or he has to take the floor. There's no very structured turn taking like there is in the Western context. Here someone talks, no one will interfere you, everyone will listen, and then the other person will talk. And I had such a hard time learning how to talk and react like them, because I have this tendency of completely jumping in when I feel like it, because that's very, very important or part of who I am. They're spiraling out and spiraling back in. So there's not usually a very straight, concrete topic in Golpo. We start from something, we go somewhere else, we come back. It's storied knowledge. So if, as a researcher, you want to find out facts, discrete facts, and evidences, I don't think Golpo would be the way. But if you want that narrative kind of knowledge about experience, it might be better. And for me, the most important part was that it's emotional, it's personal. Now, I wanted to know what technology meant for these teachers. Why were they using technology from the depths of Happia? And I needed to know about their emotional relationships with it. And there might be personal and emotional associations with it. So I thought that Golpo would be the best way to go about it. Another thing is, when we do our research, we also need to think about ourselves as a research tool. So who I am is as much as a research tool in my research, especially qualitative research, as any other method is. Now, basically, when I think about myself, I like connecting with people. I like emotionally connecting with people. And if I try to do something that's against me, that won't be very natural. It won't be very authentic. So I write about my position and who I am and how that has shaped my research. And I try to use that as a strength in my research. And that's why Golpo, I think, has worked for me. So another important strength of Golpo is building relationships as opposed to conveying facts. And if you're doing qualitative research nowadays, there's lots and lots of discussion about how you need to build these relationships of trust and empathy with your participants for authentic data. And I think the Golpo serves a wonderful purpose in that respect. There are obviously some drawbacks. of Golpos, which needs to be controlled a bit sometimes, like there's a lot of exaggeration, we float away, we come back. You can't obviously put a time on the Golpo scale. So it might be anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours, 2.5 hours. But if you impose a time scale, that takes away the flavor of what we're trying to do. There's lots of exaggeration. So you have to think about all of these things and stylistic features if you want to think about using it in your research and why you're using it in your research. Overall, for me, it was the ethical aspect of creating participatory spaces that influenced me the most. And again, if I come back to, as I said, Sunderland was a very influential figure in shaping my ideas. So Sunderland argues about the political and ethical aspects of using other formats with your participants. So is it ethical to ask someone to communicate with you in another way, or something that is not their own language? That's not their way of representation. That might create that barrier, that positioning between the researcher and the participant. And Kinden is another person, another academic who works with participatory research and approaches. And Kinden mainly argues about challenging hierarchical relations between the researcher and the researched. So when we go as a researcher to a very rural teacher and we sit there, oh, I'm here to see your classroom, I'm here to research you about what you know, there's this positioning, power positioning going on. There's really no relationship. And do you think a rural teacher will talk about the depths of their experiences or what they really think about in that kind of formal, structured, positioned space? I don't think if I want experiences that really works. So I think Golpo, if we go and say, Appa, I'm going to do lots of Golpo with you over the next 1 year, I think that really helps break down that power position and build an equal relationship with people you are researching. And this is a quote that I really like from Dennis. And what Dennis says is, how can we be sure of authenticity when the very production of the voice or gathering of the story may itself be a form of oppression? And now form of oppression doesn't need to be kind of torture. Oppression might be making someone feel a sense of discomfort, making them feel limited, making them say things that you want them to say, rather than giving them more space to say what they want to say. So as researchers, I think it's our ethical duty to think about what am I imposing upon my participant, and do I want to impose that on my participant? And what is the ethics of imposing that on my participant? So that's a bit about my ethical, academic, personal background of why I created participatory spaces, the methods that I kind of used to create the participatory spaces. And in the next section, I'm going to move on to so what. So you might ask, yeah, okay, you've used all of these methods. So what did this mean? What did you find? Just like Said Bhai asked me. But before moving on to this third part, again, I'd like to ask anyone over here, do you want to say something? Do you have any opinions? Do you have any questions?
We can ask Abu Siddiq. Abu Siddiq, you can unmute and ask the question that you posed there. Abu Siddiq, are you there?
Yes, I am listening, sir.
Feel comfortable. প্রশ্নটা করা যেতে পারে.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, madam. সুন্দর প্রেজেন্টেশনের জন্য, but I am very much curious যে আপনারা আসলে স্টাডি অবজেক্টিভস অনুযায়ী যেহেতু আপনি মেথডোলজি ডিফাইন করছেন, একটু যদি অবজেক্টিভসটা একটু বলতেন তাহলে আমার জন্য একটু সুবিধা হতো অ্যাজ এ রিসার্চার হিসেবে যে মাল্টিমোডালিটি এবং গল্প যে মেথড হিসেবে টেকনিক্স ইউজ করছেন আসলে রিলেট করলেন কিভাবে বা কোন ডাটার জন্য আপনার ওই অবজেক্টিভসটা মিট আপ করতে হচ্ছে।
So if I share my research questions, so my research question is, So the overall aim is understanding teachers' experiences of technology, right? So I want to know more about their experiences. And the research questions are, what are teachers' experiences of using technology? What do they perceive? And how are these experiences constructed? So if a teacher is saying, I really love using technology, that's my experience of using technology, I wanted to look into what social cultural processes, what historical processes were producing that experience. So for instance, if someone says, I don't like technology, what made that person not like technology? What social cultural structures made that person not like technology? What historical structures or identity factors made that person not like technology? So because my aims, objectives, research questions is looking in depth into their experiences to identify the social cultural processes that's going on. So it's a sociological study of technology. I needed in-depth, authentic descriptions from my teachers and constructions and reconstructions of that experience in different kinds of ways. So sometimes they expressed that experience in a verbal mode. Sometimes they expressed that experience in a visual mode. So over the 1 year that I was collecting data, they were expressing their experience in different ways, through different lenses, and we were having that dialogue that Said Bhai was asking me about around those multimodal artifacts. And through that, as I said, because it's a participatory approach, we co-constructed what we found. We co-constructed our experience. So co-construction is something that's very different from other forms or epistemological approaches. We believe that it creates a different kind of insight to complement other insights that are there. So does that answer your question? Did I get the question right?
Okay, now I'm clear about that.
আমরা আরেকটা প্রশ্ন আছে নিব আইভি এখন
Yeah, obviously.
Can I ask Dr. Furkan? He asked a beautiful question. I was asking the same question to our president today. Dr. Furkan Sharkar, please.
Hello. Sorry, actually I'm using my husband's account. Yeah,
it's so sorry. You have to change your name.
This is Tanzil.
Yeah, Tanzil, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, ma'am. What about you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, ma'am, my question is like how Golpo is different from narrative technique?
Well, Golpo, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Is that the question? Do you have any other questions?
No, this is the question I want to ask you.
Tanzil, how do you spell your name?
Tanzil.
Okay, thank you. It is done. Huh? Your name is changed. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So when we say narrative technique, the Western idea of narrative technique is you ask a question and then the person goes on and on and on and you don't interrupt. And you build a narrative, right? You build a story. So the method is quite different. When we're doing Golpo, as I said, it signals that co-creation. So I talk, you talk, whenever you want, I talk, you talk. There's no set theme. There's no set sense of time. There's no set turn taking. So it's completely a different cultural form discursively than what the Westerners feel as narrative. Whenever they say narrative, they think of that structured story. It's going to have a beginning, it's going to have the climax, it's going to have the end. So it's their view of what a story is. And if you ask me what Golpo is, but what Golpo we do, it's a verb, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a way of communicating with other people. So Golpo is more of a method, a cultural method that we employ to signal co-construction, to signal participation, to signal equal power.
Yeah.
Signal that we're going to learn from each other. And it doesn't have that very definition of a narrative technique. I have to do this, this, and this. Because when I try to do narrative, obviously, so that's a very good question.
Yes.
And with my supervisor, you know Diane, right?
Yes, ma'am.
We tried using narrative and I was saying, this is not working for me because I can't work with definitions. That you have to do this, this, this. The very spirit of Golpo is that I'm going to go, I'm going to sit with my cup of tea, I'm going to talk, I'm going to connect.
Yeah.
And I want to know everything about you. I want to build a relationship about you. And I said that I don't get that spirit, that vibe anywhere else, unless and until I'm saying that I'm using a Golpo. So if I, in my research, said that I'm doing a narrative technique, nothing about what I was doing would fall into that very structured definition. That's why I said, okay, let me do it my way. If you call it a narrative, call it a narrative. I'm going to call it a Golpo, and that's what works for me. And that's what kind of tunes with who I am as a Bangladeshi. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think
So much, ma'am.
Afroza Akhter wanted to ask something. Tina, you wanted to say something, please?
Yes, ma'am. If you permit, I also want to ask.
Yeah. Oh, obviously, this is a Golpo. You can.
No permission. Yeah.
Yeah, no
Go ahead.
permission.
Well, I was just wondering, ma'am, because you know the teachers with whom you discuss and talked about several issues, well, don't know actually how you will be presenting their voices
Yes.
through your research paper. So, I mean, how actually you will be portraying them, their ideas, their expressions, because the language will change, because you will be writing in English, of course. So maybe some expressions or words, I don't know. So how did you ensure that, ma'am? I was just wondering.
Well, I've done something that throughout my analysis, as I said, again, it's co-construction. So throughout my analysis, I've shared my interpretation, firstly, in Bengali, okay, with my teachers, and asked them do you agree with my interpretation? Do you agree with my themes? That's first. The second way that's what we discussed in our supervisory meetings, is that in my PhD thesis, I'll have to present the data both in Bengali and English, so that there's more transparency. I cannot just present the English portion of any data that I'm presenting, so that if anyone comes back and if I'm publishing, so the readers have that agency to see, to create their own interpretation. So the English that I'm translating is my interpretation, right? But the Bangla will always be there. The basics will always be there. And the themes were developed co-constructed with my teachers. And they had a say in each and every step about what I'm doing and how I'm doing. And there have been instances when they said that, Appa, can you take away this? I don't want to say this, or I don't want you to have this in your paper. I don't want you to have this in your presentation. Even before any presentations, I go back to those teachers and I ask them, okay, Appa, I'm doing this, I'm going to say this. It's anonymous, I know, but do you want me to say this? And they're always they've been wonderful, and they've been very supportive in my research. And they're always like, okay, Appa, go ahead. If you want to portray our voices, portray our voices.
Yes, ma'am. I think that your research is more actually about engagements, I guess. It's more about engagements. That's wonderful, ma'am. Thank you so much for answering my question.
Ivy, আমি কি একটা প্রশ্ন করতে পারি না একটু পরে
না আপনারা আবার কেন পারমিশন দ্যাটস গোইং अगेंस्ट দ্য স্পিরিট অফ হোয়াট
আমি ভাবছি যে কিছুটা প্রেজেন্টেশন স্টপ করে দিলাম কিনা
না বাট দ্যাটস
একটা মানে আমার জাস্ট একটা কোয়েশ্চন আমার মাথায় আসছে যে টকিং অ্যাবাউট অথেন্টিসিটি এন্ড টকিং অ্যাবাউট retelling the story, because it's a co-construction and I'm talking to my participants, and this is very much I can understand. It talks about emotions, it talks about very personal, and when we're talking co-construction, as a researcher, I'm retelling the story anyway.
Yeah.
So most of the time, possibly I'll be rephrasing many things that say, because you're talking about translating, transcribing, because you possibly, if I am not wrong, গল্পটা পুরোটাই তো বাংলায় হচ্ছে, because that's the আমার participant.
Right.
গল্পটাকে আমি বাংলায় তুলে নিয়ে আসলাম এবং আমরা untranslatability ব্যাপারটা জানি, or lost in translation টাও আমরা বলি.
Absolutely.
So as a researcher, isn't it very challenging when I'm reproducing the গল্প?
Yeah.
How authentic that remains, because the entire narration that I don't know it depends on the researcher capacity also, competence also.
Obviously.
যে আমি ঠিক ওই গল্পটা কতটুকু অরিজিনাল ভাবে I can report it back. এই জায়গাটাতে আমাকে একটু জাস্ট আমার একটা কোয়েরি আছে, how do you handle that, the question of the data analysis or interpretations from the point of researcher view, and how do you accommodate or how do you maintain the originality of the golpo
Okay.
সেটা কতটুকু রাখা যায় আসলে?
So this is a very big area which is called bilingual research. So there's a lot of like academic discussion around doing bilingual research, how you do it, how you maintain the authenticity of these kinds of researches. And the key main argument, rather than going into everything else, is maintaining transparency in each and every step. Detailing and writing, when you're writing your thesis, how you approached everything and why you approached it that way. So one of the methods that we agreed on in my supervisory team, I was saying to Tina, is that I need to represent it in both languages. That's why I might have, instead of 80,000, my thesis might be 85,000 because it's a bilingual research. First, that thing. Second is like every time I translate, there's a footnote because there's loads and loads of Bengali connotations that you cannot just translate or even transliterate. You need to explain what that is. So I've used lots of footnotes. The third thing, again, as I told Tina, is that because the aim of that data is to construct, I did thematic analysis. So thematic analysis is trying to find those meaning patterns that lie behind the data, right? So what I did is I shared the categories and the themes that I was developing and asked like, Appa, do you agree that there's this positioning happening? Do you agree that you're positioning that person negatively and that person is positioning you negatively? And then I try to tell the story again. Onek golpo, 2 ghonta, 3 ghonta. Appa, this is what I think is happening. What do you think? And then they tell me back, I think this is happening. So in terms of authenticity, again, I say it's co-constructed with my participants. So yes, we have that multimodal data, we have those Golpo, but it didn't end just there. It was an ongoing process. And also I talked to A2I project management team too. So they call me from time to time and ask me what's going on. And I'm like, okay, I think this, and this is going on. What do you say? And they say, okay, they have their opinions about what's going on. But as I said, authenticity is co-created in my research. That might not work for positivistic approaches, that might not work for other approaches, but as Tina has said, because I'm more about engagement and participatory spaces, that's who I am, that's what I can bring. And the insights produced by my research is a set of insights that can complement insights from other research. So I'm not saying this is the truth. I'm saying this is a kind of truth that I arrived at through co-constructing data with my participants.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have one international participant. I can see Nada Mohsin from Iran. I don't know how you're enjoying our Golpo because we are also using bilingual discussion sometime. But it seems you just wrote that I'm glad I'm with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, Ivy, please.
Oh, should I? Okay.
Yeah, we can again come back to things.
So as you were saying, like, so what, Ivy? You've used all of these things. What did it produce for you? And this is my own version, my Golpo, my experience of what happened with me. So I went in with this gaze. Because I was building this relationship, I needed to be very aware about the assumptions that I'm going with, and how those assumptions are changing through that co-constructions, or else I won't be transparent. So before going into my field work and anything, I wrote down my gaze. What do I think about teachers' practice in Bangladesh? To me, I thought, okay, I'm a researcher now. I'm a PhD researcher now. I'm researching the digital. I didn't think I quite had something common with these teachers in Hatia. And to be very, very honest, I didn't have that sense of real empathy that I have now. What was my assumption about the practice? I thought that the textbooks are fixed, textbook-based lessons. There's not supposed to be much criticality. These are teacher-centered pedagogy, and it's very authoritative interaction. So because one of my questions to them was, what does multimedia mean to you? I thought they would say, okay, multimedia is PowerPoint, And it means recognition, like being recognized in Shikok Batayon, getting those awards. Maybe that's what was driving them on using technology. My assumption about multimedia teachers, well, they only had a 14-day training, which was not enough. Maybe some of them were performing under government pressure from the head teacher, because, you know, there's a very big pressure from top down for the becoming digital Bangladesh. So maybe that was one of the structures that were making them using technology. I didn't think they would have a lot of passion about education. I didn't think they would have a lot of creativity. That is what I went in. And this is the kind of, if you asked me, Ivy, what was your vision about multimedia classrooms? This is what I saw multimedia classrooms to be. The teacher standing at the front, some sort of projection going on, students sitting in rows, and they were listening to the teacher, and the teacher was presenting to the PowerPoint. And I didn't even expect any difference in the interaction pattern. So before, the teacher was teaching from the textbook, now the teacher is teaching from the PowerPoint. There's no difference in interaction or question format or anything. The very first multimodal artifact that I received was this. Now, if you put that beside this, what do you think? Like, anyone, what would you think? Can anyone just say what your first impression is? Side by Tina.
Some creativity.
Yeah, hello.
Some creativity.
Yeah, some kind of creativity, yeah. So this was in response to the prompt, what is multimedia to you, right? And I, as I said, I went in with my assumption, multimedia is PowerPoint, multimedia is teaching, multimedia is learning. And there's a nice story. Before that, because I thought that, okay, I went back to that participant, I said, you didn't understand what I want. I want to know what multimedia is to you. And she said, no, you don't understand what I sent. This has a story behind it. And I said, okay, tell me your story. And she told me that she has been a rural teacher throughout her life, right? And everyone, and a female on top of that. So everyone throughout her lifetime has said, oh, Niki Jane, she's a primary teacher, she's a rural teacher, oh, she's a female, she's engaged in cooking and cleaning all the day, she doesn't know anything. She said that's what I practice with, that's my practice. And suddenly I get called to this multimedia training. And there, the trainer told me, this is a PowerPoint. Can you make a PowerPoint by adding materials, songs, images that you like? And she told the trainer, how do I know what to add? I always I teach from the textbook. And the trainer told her, no, you add whatever you want. And she sat there and she started adding these things to like make a lesson based on the textbook. And she said that suddenly gave me that surge of emotion. Like, can I really create? Is someone really asking me to create? Do I really have the capability to create? But she said that felt so good. That felt so good. And when she came back, she had this multimedia classroom set up for her. And her head teacher said, this is the multimedia classroom. This is your space. You can use it. And she said, I was positioned so differently than how I was positioned throughout my whole life. Like, as someone who doesn't know, as someone who's not capable, as someone who's not valued. So what I did is I sat down that afternoon, made all of these beautiful paper flowers, and I put them all around my multimedia classroom, because this, for the very first time in my life, was my space. Now, from a theoretical perspective, what my vision was like framed by a technological affordance. Whenever we say technology, we kind of think about technology from a material perspective. What can we do? what the teacher was saying is that her conception of technology was more symbolic and what we call a cultural artifact. It had a symbolic value to her. It was no more something very material to do with, but it was something that was shaping her. It was something that was positioning her. It was something that she felt to be a space and a tool of agency. So that's how you see like a co-construction goes on between the researcher and the researched, and we learn from our participants. So more examples of what happened. So this is another participant who told me, and you have to bear in mind, these are very motivated teachers. So I didn't work with non-motivated teachers. All of my participants were best teachers. So they would have passion about using technology. This teacher told me that she uses it more or less because of the same reason. It's because that she felt that she can create creativity. She told me, Appa, I always used to write these small poems and I never found a space to express myself. Now I have a PowerPoint. I write small poems in relation to the topic, and then I upload it in Batayon and people read my poems. And that's, I feel so, so good. But then she went on and talked about how she didn't have time to create those PowerPoints. She had school, she came back from school, she had to take care of her family, she has family chores, she has to take care of her in-laws. But she also craved that little space that she was given to create. Sometimes she would get up at 3 a.m. at night and work till dawn just to feel that creativity and that feel of expressing herself and being valued. Again, she said that as a woman, I've never been valued. I feel valued when I produce something. A bit about how meaning was, more examples of how meaning was co-created. And this is an example of what Golpo did. So this was in the middle of one of the Golpos. And I was saying, Appa, what about your challenges that you face? You know, the power cuts, internet speed, connectivity, your constant struggles. And if you listen back to the recording, I was just cut off there. She was saying, no, what are you saying? I'm like, what? And she said, you know what you define as challenges. I never see these as challenges. This is how my life is. This is part of what I am. This is normal to me. I'm very happy with the way things are. And maybe these are blessings. I don't want more technology in my life. Then she went on to talk about her challenges in social and cultural terms. So she had these social challenges, she had cultural challenges, these historical processes that were limiting, infrastructural processes that were limiting. But you know that my conceptualization that internet speed is a challenge, that was cut off right there. So I might think it's a challenge, but actually it wasn't. Challenges were of completely different nature. These were not material ones. Now, criticality. That was the thing I least expected of my teacher, so that's my fault. I went towards the end of my data collection. They sent me images that showed a lot of criticality regarding their teaching and learning. So the image on the left, it was like, Appa, why do we need to use technology? I can make my class fun in lots of other ways. We do something called hate kolome. So she brought in these polythenes and they made parachutes, and it was a lesson on wind pressure as far as I remember. And she said children enjoyed it as much as technology. Why do we need technology? And not that, we had some wonderful conversations around how teachers were becoming critical regarding the curriculum. Now, this is a very, very interesting story. So she was telling me, like, where is ethics and morality in today's education? And I said, why are you suddenly talking about ethics and morality? And she was like, you know, A2I, when they train us, they tell us and they ask us, like, this is good education. You teach the textbook. And she was like, in the textbook, we don't have ethics and morality. And that is something that we absolutely need in education. And I said, why do you think so? So she replied that the other day, one of her students came to her with an egg. So he climbed up a tree, he stole an egg from a bird's nest and brought it as a gift to her. And she was like, oh, that's not a good thing to do at all. And then she said there was another incident where one of the students threw a stone on the beehive. The bees came all buzzing out and they bit all the other students who were playing. And then she was like, that's not a good thing to do. And she was like, Appa, do you know, as a teacher, every day I see students doing these naughty things that they don't have any idea about, that these are naughty. And she was like, that made me think, like, what's wrong with the education system? And as an initiative, she created this club called Esho Bhalo Kajer Golpo Kori, based on her experience. So students sit here 30 minutes. This is in her multimedia classroom, by the way. Students sit here 30 minutes after school. They talk about doing good things. And she says, at the beginning, they didn't have many stories to share, but over time, they saw there was a competition. I did this, no, I did this. Oh, you did one thing, I did two things. So she was like, can we not do these things to improve our education? That really amazed me. And that made me think actually about our educational system. That's a very valid question that we might ask ourselves. Then there was a lot of criticality regarding what A2I was doing. So here's one of the experiences or quotes where they were talking about, like, our examination is memorization based. A2I asks us to use fun and excitement in class. So how does that link with that memorization based exams? It doesn't work. You need to change the whole system and then we can do something. But if you keep that whole system like it is and ask me to create and contribute, that doesn't work at all. There were obviously lots of conflicts. One of the conflicts that I didn't put here is, as I said, Said Bhai, there was lots of negative positioning going on between technology using teachers and non-technology using teachers. There were also conflicts regarding A2I. So they thought that A2I had favoritism sometimes. So the people who can only fill the app, they get the leadership roles, they get more focused, and the other people are not inspired. So they felt really constrained. They said, yes, I'm using PowerPoint, but there's a lot of micropolitics going on inside that Bataillon space, inside these competitions, and inside the mentorship spaces. So that's what I found. And if you ask me what I learned personally across this journey, is I became aware that there might be multiple realities. So how I conceptualize things is not necessarily how other people conceptualize things. And the other greatest contribution to me, I would say, is empathy and respect for rural teachers. They made me think, they made me question. They showed me what actually participation is, what education might be. So yes, that's something that's changed a lot now since the beginning. So very briefly, my presentation today. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. Ivy, we can stop sharing.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Oh gosh.
You have to just close it.
Yeah, I'm trying to, but it's not closing. What can I do to make it close?
Escape close.
Yeah, I'm trying to. It's not working.
It's just from your computer. You can give the escape button.
Okay, let me see if this is stuck. Yeah, I've got it now.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, it seems like there are many questions. So we are keeping it open now. আমরা এখন একটু গল্প করব এবং আমাদের আইভি যেভাবে আমাদেরকে খুব সুন্দর করে গল্পের ব্যাপারগুলো বললো, যাদের কিছু কোয়েশ্চেন আছে, I request you to raise questions এবং এখানে আমি একজন দেখতে পাচ্ছি মতিউর রহমান অনেকক্ষণ ধরে মনে হয় হাত তুলে রেখেছে সো মতিউর রহমান আপনি কি কোনো প্রশ্ন করতে চান কিনা
Hello,
thank you.
Motiur. How are you?
Hello, ma'am. I'm fine, ma'am. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. Nice to hear from you. It's been such a long time.
Yes, ma'am. It has been such a long time, and I'm
So-
very happy to be here today, listening to.
So to say a
experience
bit
that you-
about Motiur, he was my student at Dhaka University, and he was a completely very, very like serious, and I was really impressed by his sincerity. So that's why I remember Motiur so much. I'm so happy you're here today, Motiur.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
মতিউর
and-
আমরা একটা কাজ করতে পারি now all of you can actually switch on your sound and let's see if we can have a really Golpo mode video
Yeah.
on kore you can show your face then let's make it a virtual Golpo.
Sure,
And another thing, Said Bhai, like the questions should not always be answered by me. If any of you have really nice insights
Right.
to answer any other questions,
No problem.
everyone should engage.
We'll have
yeah.
a co-construction. No problem.
Yeah, let's engage everyone because I'm here to
Right.
learn from everyone, to be
Absolutely.
honest.
Okay, মতিউর আপনি একটু ইচ্ছা করলে ক্যামেরাটা অন করে কোশ্চেন করতে পারেন.
Yes,
Let's
yes.
switch on the
Motiur,
camera.
let me see you. I haven't seen you
Let's
for such
let's
a long
see
time.
faces. If you're okay with
Yes,
it.
ma'am. Things have changed so much.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Sorry to put
No,
you on
no.
the spot.
It's okay, ma'am. It's okay. It's so good to see you after so long time, and things have changed a lot. And
Yeah.
it has been 3 years of my teaching experience, and
Oh, really?
I have been.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. It has been 3 years, so it's such a long time. And right now I'm teaching at Dhaka University of Engineering and Technology, DUET, and before that
Okay.
I taught at East West for 1.5 years.
Yep.
So it was really, ma'am, your ideas of, your work. One thing that particularly interested me was the Golpo thing. It's an entirely new idea to me. So as I'll be, I'll just ask for your opinion in one regard, which is, so for example, in my locality, I have some primary schools and high schools where teachers are, who were my teachers at one time, and now there are many new teachers. And I see when I go to my village and I see their teaching techniques, the students, their feedbacks and everything, I feel like I should get to know their opinions about certain things that we
Yeah.
deal academically, and we use academic terms. But I'm afraid if I go for data to them, to collect, if I want to go to collect data from those particular peripheral settings, then one problem might be that they might quite, as you said, if it's not a Golpo situation, that it might be a staged situation. They might not share their authentic experience and everything. But as they are my familiar people, so if I set the entire, if I go for the Golpo setting, then maybe I will get some authentic data. Now the question is, if as I am a researcher, I am looking for a specific answer to a specific problem. Now, it seemed to me that what you shared as your experience. So when there is the Golpo is going on, it's not kind of, pre-planned, or there is no formal setting as like semi-structured or structured interviews. So how much control do I have over the content or over the topic that will be discussed in the Golpo session? So as my purpose is to gather specific response from them, so do I have that much control?
Well, as I said, it depends on what you're looking for. So if your aim and objective, for me, the aim and objective was what are their experiences rather than me imposing that this is your experience. But if you go into other traditions where you're specifically looking for a particular answer to a particular question, Golpo might not work. It might work if you have one question. Like today, আমরা আজকে গল্প করব এই জিনিসটা নিয়ে, এই কোয়েশ্চেনের উপরে, a broad theme. Like for me, it was like, what are your experiences of multimedia learning, right? So it was a broad theme, not to say there wasn't a theme. You can agree on 2 or 3 broad themes and say, আজকে আমরা করব, like academic Adda here. So in each session, there's a different theme. right? And that's what I also did with my participants, because it was a longitudinal research. And I believe in, if you're after authentic data, I think there's been so much research which looks at just one slice of reality. There's no research that goes over time. We just pick one slice. We go one day, talk to you, come back, that's done. Do I really have that relationship with that person to tell me all about what he's thinking? Even when someone asks me a question today, like today I'm going to get a lot of questions. Do you know when I'm going to come up with the best answers? After 3 days, probably in the shower. I can't answer then and there. Why do I expect my participants are going to give me all of that information in that very formal situation in that one part? I say build up relationships with these people over time first, and then arrange a few sessions. If you really want to use Golpo and really want particular answers, arrange a few sessions, each with one theme, like we do in academic Adda, if that works for you. What do you think?
Yeah, I was also thinking the same, and it can work, but I mean, from ethical perspective, is it, will it be kind of mandatory, or will it be okay for me to share my topic for that particular day, that I'm going to use this, for research purpose? So because there is a tendency among the participants, whenever they hear about something like research or their ideas will be shared, they get, some sort of, they feel uneasy to share their experience.
That's exactly what I'm working against, like to break down that positionality that creates that barrier in expressing ourselves. And you have to invest yourself. When I went into my field work, with my supervisors, we decided that I'm not going to 15 days of field work in Hatia, and we didn't collect any data. We used that time to build a relationship of trust and care. So I called them over to my place. We had dinner together. Hatia doesn't have electricity at night. We sat by the pond, we talked. I went to the schools, walked back from school. 15 days completely invested in building a relationship. They knowing who I am, they getting a vibe about who I am, me knowing them. I came back to Manchester. Even then, we decided like 1 month to kind of communicate, build relationships, and then go in and say, okay, regarding your multimedia.
That can be, and yes, ma'am, I really like this idea, because in research, especially if it's a qualitative research, going for insights is very important. So I think,
absolutely.
And one more thing, ma'am, I wanted to ask: are you using the term Golpo, quote unquote?
Yes, absolutely. I've used the term Golpo, and I was really very shaky at the beginning because no one has used this in methodology. And my supervisor said, "Look, we don't know anything about Golpo." My supervisor, Diane, right?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Yeah. So Diane was like, "Oh, the only thing I can say about you people is that you're very noisy when you're talking together." So I was like, I want to use that. And she said, "Look, it's your discretion. Do you want to use it or not?" So what I did is I called, I remember Bijoy sir, he was doing his PhD here. I said, "Bijoy sir, this is an idea. Should I go for it?" And then Oshinda was doing his PhD back here. And I told Oshinda, "Can I go for it? What do you think?" And both of them gave me a lot of strength. Okay, go for it. That's how new things come. If you feel that's part of who you are, and if you feel that that's how you can communicate by calling it a Golpo, then why not?
Yes, ma'am. I think just very, the use of this very specific word, quote unquote, Golpo.
Yeah.
If we can, internalize this specific word into our research area, especially in the context of our country, I think just because of using this specific word will elicit more authentic and data, and it will create a better relationship with the researcher and the participant. My personal opinion.
Exactly. And my teachers, participants have sometimes said that, "Appa, we like this so much that nowadays we think that ami je class e jacchi, I'm going to do Golpo. What is a lecture? I don't understand a lecture. Yes. I want to do a Golpo." So you see, this is such, I think that's such a wonderful, fantastic tool, cultural thing that we have in our context to use for many different purposes.
Thank you.
Okay, ma'am.
Ivy, can we,
Thank you
Muti
very
Rahman, thank you so much. We are
you
going
very
to
much.
the next question from, if I'm not wrong, Abu Siddiq, right? You wanted to ask the questions? Can you introduce
Yes,
yourself and ask the question? একটু পরিচয় দিয়ে প্রশ্ন করুন।
Thank you, sir. আমি বাংলায় বলি। Thank you, Taslima madam. আমি অ্যাকচুয়ালি প্রাইমারি এডুকেশন নিয়ে কাজ করি। আজকের রিসার্চ টপিকটা টোটালি আমার সাথে রিলেটেড। আমি টিচার এডুকেশনে কাজ করছি এবং লাকিলি এই প্রোগ্রাম সেটার সাথে বিগিনিং প্রসেসে আমি ছিলাম। আমি মাল্টিমিডিয়া ট্রেনার হিসেবে কাজ করছি। সো টোটাল রিসার্চ টপিক আমি খুব এনজয় করছি। আমার কাছে সবচেয়ে ভালো লাগছে আজকে যে আপনার কাছে একটা টেকনিক শিখলাম গল্প। হয়তো একটা সময় হয়তো আমিও অ্যাজ এ রিসার্চার হিসেবে আপনাকে কোট করব যে এই ম্যাডামের রিসার্চ থেকে এই টেকনিক। সো ইউ আর দ্য ব্র্যান্ডিং অফ দিস টেকনিক।
Oh, thank you so much.
My question is, যেহেতু আপনি এই রিসার্চটা করছেন অনলি টিচার্স পার্সপেক্টিভ থেকে, যে অ্যাকচুয়ালি হাউ দে আর ওয়েলকামিং দ্য টেকনোলজি, স্পেশালি দ্য মাল্টিমিডিয়া ক্লাসরুম, এবং তাদের পেশনেটটা কেমন এটা ইউজের ক্ষেত্রে। বাট আপনি কি স্টুডেন্টের পার্সপেক্টিভ থেকে চিন্তা করছেন বা স্টুডেন্ট ছিল না এটা? তাহলে ম্যাডাম আমার একটা কোশ্চেন ছিল, আপনি জাস্ট গেজ আপনার আউটকামে দেখাচ্ছিলেন যে টিচারদের একটা অভিমত ছিল যে টেক্সট বুকটা আমাদের ওই রকম আপ টু ডেট না, A2A একরকম বলতেছে, টেক্সট বুকটা ডিফারেন্ট, এটা একটা জিনিসটা। আপনি কি আসলে মনে করেন যে টিচার যে অবজারভেশনটা ছিল টেক্সট বুক সম্পর্কে, তাদের মেথোডোলজি আসলে কি এটা মানে রিয়েল কিনা? কারণ তারা তো অনেক কথা বলতে পারে, বাট অ্যাজ এ রিসার্চার হিসাবে আমাকে তো এটা ফাইন্ড করতে হবে যে আমি এটা কিভাবে করব।
So again, coming from the aims and objectives of the research, what you're talking about is kind of trying to find a truth. Like, so if you move towards positivistic, constructivist approaches, you look for a certain, not constructivist, positivistic, you look for a certain truth. And I aim to discover that truth by removing the biases, by removing the emotions and everything. So teacher jeta bolche seta sotto kina, ami ekta, I believe there's a truth out there and I'm there for a truth. So that's one kind of research that you might aim for. And then you'll use different techniques, you might triangulate. So teacher jeta bolche, ami tapor observation e jabo, ami tapor student er kache jabo, ami different social groups er kache jabo, because I'm after the truth. For me, my research was more about teachers, what were their experiences, teacher ki feel korche, and এই feelingsটা কেন হচ্ছে, what social cultural structures are producing that experience for the teacher. So teacher যদি বলে যে আমি agentic feel করছি, why is she feeling agentic? So the gender issue was there, right? The social cultural construction of her as a rural teacher was there. সারা জীবন তাকে negatively position করানো হয়েছে। সারা জীবন তাকে বলা হয়েছে, you're a female, you don't know anything, you're a rural teacher, you don't know anything. And then she said that she had been positioned as an empty vessel in our structure. Oh, you're a rural teacher, come to the training, and this is what the knowledge that you need. And so I analyzed those social cultural structural things present in our society that made her feel agentic. So that was my aim. So my aim was not to understand any truth that's out there. যে আপনার এক্সপেরিয়েন্সটা আছে এটা কি সত্য না মিথ্যা, আপনি কি আসলেও ইউজ করছেন সেটা না। আমার ইচ্ছা ছিল যে টিচারদের টেকনোলজি নিয়ে যখন কেউ ইউজ করে তার যে এক্সপিরিয়েন্স হয় সেটা কি কি কারণে হতে পারে। So research questions were not observed. If you want to create a research that wants to look into if what they're saying, how true it is according to your viewpoint, because what they're saying is true according to their viewpoint. So you cannot say যে তোমার viewpoint wrong, আমার viewpoint right. সবারই viewpoint থাকে from different perspectives. What we can do as researchers is bring different viewpoints together to show like, okay, teacher এটা বলছে, student এটা বলছে, আমি এটা বলছি from my position. And no one is right and no one is wrong if it is a qualitative research. If it's a positivistic research, they have their own understandings. But again, no qualitative researcher will say that my research is 100% truth. They also say that, okay, I'm producing 90% of the truth, but they'll never claim 100%. So if you're doing qualitative research, the basic thing is to understand that আমার experience or experience or as a qualitative researcher, I can bring together contrasting stories. I can bring together contrasting viewpoints, and everyone can have their own interpretation. As a researcher, this is my interpretation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the teacher's viewpoint or their view of what they have is wrong. So does that answer your question?
Okay, right. Ivy, আমাদের সাথে আমাদের খুবই শ্রদ্ধেয় ডক্টর এমডি জামিল আছেন from the UK. জামিল, my long time colleague, we work together এবং জামিলের সাথে রেগুলার গল্প হয়। তো জামিলকে দেখে আমার খুব ভালো লাগে, ও আমাদের প্রোগ্রামগুলো রেগুলারই উনি করেন। জামিল, any comment on Taslima Ivy? Both of you are geographically located, possibly.
That's fine. প্রথমে অবজেকশন আছে যে শ্রদ্ধেয় শব্দটার প্রতি।
সরি, আমাদের একাডেমিক ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজে আমরা ঢাকা ইউনিভার্সিটির শ্রদ্ধেয় সবাই সবাইকে বলি।
আচ্ছা, আমি
গল্প সেশন বাই দ্য ওয়ে।
হ্যাঁ, তার জন্য শ্রদ্ধা নিয়ে নিলাম আর কি। আচ্ছা, তো I was writing a few points actually, so I'll share my reflections and a few questions to you, direct questions to you. যে কোয়েশ্চেনটা রেজ করেছেন, actually I was about to ask the same question to you. When we say about Golpo, basically in Bangladesh we say Golpo Gujob. It means that there's some fiction there. So how you separate fiction with the reality, authentic information, but you have explained that very nicely. Thank you very much. As my background is with critical realist investigation, so I try to see actually things from different perspectives. Like
Can I just
when
say
you
one thing? I've faced the most severest criticisms from people who are critical realists, who are positivists. So I'm really feeling a bit nervous right now. Okay.
No, that's fine actually, because Abu Siddiq sir, the question he raised that we can get different Golpos, different stories from different people. So we need to actually construct something combining all this together. But you said that it's not necessary because your aim was to just listen to the teachers, someone will listen to the students.
Or my ontological position, epistemological or ontological position is there is no one truth out there. There's multiple realities.
Definitely. But as a reader, think about that I'm reading your thesis. And I'm just listening to yours. So I need to personalize what you say. So to just help me, can you just tell me how many teachers actually you engaged in? Three teachers.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure that in your thesis you have explained their background, the context, because without the context. Yeah. So the thing is, when they give an information and you think that, okay, the information is not very much, what can I say, comparable with other situation, it's very much different and unique. Did you face any situation that you thought that, okay, you need to go further, you need to go and investigate the situation and context to see actually whether the story is transferable to other people? Because a story from Dhaka-based teacher is not transferable to think about Pabna.
So if you talk about, so you're talking about, again, terms from critical realism. So you talk about generalizability, you talk about sampling, you talk about the truth, and these are terms that belong to that positivistic and critical realist camp, right? If we try to transfer those into participatory, co-constructive, or qualitative approaches, the things that you say are not what we aim for. So we do not claim generalizability at all. As sociologists, our aim is to document reality from different perspectives and try to look at what structures are creating, historical structures might be creating. We don't try to generalize, and we don't have any aim at all of predicting, doing a hypothesis, or doing a transfer. So it's very, very bound in context, and the aim is to understand that particular person in that time, in that context, in depth. So that's why we don't even go for 30 people, 3 people. I have a colleague here who did her PhD based on 1 person because it was in depth. It's qualitative. So we don't aim for generalization. Obviously, if you aim for generalization, if you aim for transferability, that's more in those camps that you were talking about. You will have more research, you will have to have more participants, you will have to have different ontological understandings, you'll have to have different methods and everything. But depending on our aim as sociological researchers, and broadly, if you read about qualitative research, it's more about documenting what's happening now and here, rather than predicting the future. And that's why we don't even use hypothesis or anything. We just want to go in and understand experience.
So this, can I just expand my ideas? Because when you actually was sharing the topic of your thesis, I was thinking that it is very much like policy implication kind of thing, that you really want to influence the policy. But now it is very clear that you don't care about the policy, you don't care about A2I project.
I want to start from bottom up, understanding the experiences, the structures, and then go upside.
My experience, as it is Adda actually now, my experience is like it is very difficult to influence policymakers with qualitative findings, because they think that, okay, there's only 3 people and these 3 people are different. But when you just gather information, think about like in a quantitative way, engage more people. So it might be a bit challenging task for you to convince people like who actually looks after the policies, definitely, with the findings, but you don't care about that. That's the main thing.
No. As I said, that this is qualitative and we don't predict. And sociological research, if you look, doesn't give any recommendations. So we start from understanding the experience. Now, if you want to go the next step and say, okay, so I don't have any recommendations because mine is a sociological research, and I can't give recommendations based on 3 teachers. It's not a critical realist study. It's not a positivistic study. It's a sociological study. Now, what I can do is say that I have these insights of positioning of social cultural structure. You never understand social cultural structures through the critical realistic perspective, because it's a survey, there's no relationship, you can't go in depth. So I think qualitative research needs to be promoted more. And I have that A2I has been really, really supportive, really, really interested, because or else I wouldn't have gotten that permission to go to Adda and everything. So I'm working closely with A2I, and I don't know why, but they're like asking me now, like, how can we go forward?
I think your present position, like as a faculty member of Dhaka University, that really helped.
Yeah, because when I first came for my PhD, before that, I also did my master's in multimedia.
That's what we say is at.
So from then on, I had that relationship with A2I. Yeah. And secondly, I would argue that, yes, policymakers do not, I don't know, but they need to understand the importance of qualitative research. For instance, in MIE, it's all about quality. As I said, PhD, no corrections, with no corrections gone through with one particular person, and her was in teacher leadership that's being taken up by the education department here. So I think in Bangladesh, there might be a tendency towards quantitative, but in UK, they really look into the depths of thing to understand, create that multiple understandings from multiple points of view and from multiple camps, and then you can act on it. So I think there's a place for both qual and quant, and they can act together to increase our understanding.
Can I participate in that also?
Yeah, of course, Saidbhai.
I totally agree with what Jamil was talking about. From my own experience, one of the longest projects that I was involved in, UNGP, it was a diploma in education. I was the team leader of monitoring team, and then I had to submit reports, and for almost 3 years I submitted reports. And I also had to present it in front of the Ministry of Education, then UNICEF, UNESCO. So many people were involved. One thing they really like is the graph, tables, and figures. They're so impressed.
Yeah.
And then I deliberately kept it because I knew that my donor agencies, they are also, it's not only Bangladeshi agents or Bangladeshi stakeholders. I could find that even UNESCO, UNICEF, I mean, they were so happy with looking at the data. Same goes to Save the Children study that I just mentioned. I was involved. one of the papers that I wrote was an ecological perspective, which actually was collected from my experience, which was an ethnographic research, which you are talking Golpo and I'm talking ethnographic research.
Yeah.
We stayed in Kushtia for almost 10 days, and then we collected data. Now, the report that I submitted, because I was hired to submit the report by a donor agency, so I had a lot of quantitative data to impress what is happening. But I had to write another critical paper in some other journal from the same data, because that unfortunately I couldn't report, because you see, if you hire me, and then I need to be very critical friend in a way that I can actually give a lot of understanding, but they'll never call you again for another funded project ever as a consultant, because you're so critical, and then they'll not.
So really you're acting on their agenda, right?
Because you see, the problem is
that's a practical reality that you have to confirm to. But I didn't have to confirm to that reality.
Right. You didn't have to, but even we don't. But what happens, like in my paper in 2015, I talked about the micro-political issues of these funded projects, where all things came actually. So I was happy to publish it in international journals. But when I submit a report, I'm giving them one perspective, because if I start giving them all these realities, then they'll be really puzzled. But I expect that gradually they will understand that it is so important that they also look into the quality, and they also look about other perspective as well.
Absolutely.
Because usually when we get involved in a project, you are hired as a consultant by, say, some particular agencies, and then of course you need to also look at that. You're funded by somebody, you're visiting and getting the data. But most of the time what I do, the critical part, I keep it for myself, where I can report it in different journals, because that's where I don't have any issues. So this is one. And there is, of course, user friendliness with the quantity part. It looks so good to look at graphs. It's easy to, and in fact, when I teach research methodology, I kept on telling, the problem with quality research is so rich. It's not that easy to interpret, because in a quantitative, it's so easy. You can possibly.
But again, do you think as human beings, numbers represent us better, or stories represent us better?
I'm sure the stories represent much better, because as I told you, I have already, one of my chapters of Bloomsbury is about narrative inquiry. Again, I'm working with ICT. So they really love the fact. And then I was thinking to ask you the same thing what Jamil was, sample size. I was so puzzled, because you say you can do it one sample size, 3, 5, okay? So does it really give a complete representative data?
Well, if your aim from that funding agency is to find something that's transferable, then you can't obviously go for 3 people, and you can't stay in this constructivist camp, this participatory camp. So you have to go to that quantitative camp and give them what they need for transferability, for generalizability. What we can do is you can have a mixed methods research, where you build understanding through the qualitative, and then you use the quantitative part to kind of see how so you use those rich insights, and then the next part will be translating that into quantitative surveys to see the generalizability, the transferability, but you have to. So I think that works.
No, most of the time we use mixed method. I'm saying that the data they really like is the quantity one. I don't think they go
will.
Through the other things which is not, because.
So as you were saying, this is the micropolitics of funding.
Yes. For example, teachers talking about their dissatisfaction with the salary, and then I need to report it. But that's not important for policymaker, because they can, and I, as a researcher, I can't do much about the salary. So many of the projects, they talk about, you are talking emotions, feelings, and other things, where the policymakers are really, really interested to really know about the emotions and the feelings. They want to know the impact. Any project, it is always impact.
So again, if your aim is impact, then and you have these very set questions which do not include emotion and understanding in depth, then you don't need these. You can do surveys, and you can do those positivistic. Absolutely, what I say all the time is anything you do depends on what you want to know. What's your aim? What's your goal? and how you decide that goal for yourself. And that kind of leads what your methodology, your method, your analysis and everything. And as I said, I'm the kind of person who can never do quantitative. I'm very much interested in relationships. That's who I am. But there are many quantitative people who are very, very interested in quants, and quant has a lot to offer too. So I think these are complementary.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a very quick question, Sadhula? Then I'll stop. Then I'll never talk today.
No, you can. This is not done.
No, the thing is, how did you choose those 3 people, lucky people, actually? What were your criteria?
Luckily, I chose the best teachers. 3 of them from Hatia that had been chosen as best teachers because I wanted to understand why are you using technology from their perspective.
So they're based in terms of their teaching, not about storytelling, isn't? So you just chose based on their professional
I chose
performance.
people who I thought could give me the story about why they're motivated in using technology.
The best teachers means like they are declared as the best by government, or that's
by the government.
Okay.
Yeah. Based on their work over the year.
They have the Sheshto Shikhok, right?
Sheshto Shikhok, Sheshto Digital Shikhok, Abu Siddiq can see maybe.
একটু হেল্প করে এটা কি সেরা কন্টেন্ট নির্মাতা যারা ওই 3 জন
ন্যাশনাল পর্যায়ে সেরা কন্টেন্ট নির্মাতা একটা ন্যাশনাল পর্যায়ে একটা ডিস্ট্রিক্ট পর্যায়ে হয় একটা ন্যাশনাল পর্যায়ে হয় সো ন্যাশনাল পর্যায়ে হাতিয়া থেকে এসেছিলেন
ওকে
স্যার এই সুযোগে ছোট্ট একটা লিংক কোশ্চেন করে ফেলি ম্যাডাম এটা আমার খুব কাজে লাগবে যেহেতু আমি টিচার এডুকেশনে কাজ করি
প্লিজ জাস্ট ব্রিফ
ম্যাডাম যেটা হচ্ছে আপনার এই ডকুমেন্টেশন একটা জায়গায় একটু বলেছেন যে টেক্সট বুকের ইনলাইন বা ডিরেকশনটা একরকম A2 এর গাইডলাইনসটা একটু ডিফারেন্ট টিচাররা অবজারভেশন এটা বলেছেন যেহেতু আপনি আমাদের 3 জন রেসপেক্টেড টিচার থেকে ডাটাটা নিয়েছেন আমার একটু ইনসাইটটা হচ্ছে যেমন ওরা তো 30 থেকে 40 মিনিটস ক্লাসের ডিজাইনটা করে আপনি একটা জায়গায় বলেছেন এটা জাস্ট রেপ্লিকেশন হচ্ছে আগে টিচার ট্যাগ গুনিত এখন জাস্ট পাওয়ারপয়েন্টটা অন করে
না সেটা আমার অ্যাজাম্পশন ছিল
এটা অ্যাজাম্পশন ছিল অ্যাকচুয়ালি কি তারা কি 40 মিনিটস কি ডিজিটাল দ্যাট মিন্স কি পাওয়ারপয়েন্টটা আর ক্লাস ইউজ করে নাকি
এটাই এখন বলে না যে পুরো ক্লাস এটাই এখন বলে না যে পুরো ক্লাস পাওয়ারপয়েন্টে হবে because if you take the whole class on a PowerPoint it becomes very structured. What A2I teaches them is that you bring in images or you bring in videos when you feel like it can help. So there's a lot of group work, individual work, and then in points where they feel like they bring in these images and they bring in these videos, which they have compiled before coming into the class because power cuts thakte pare. So they show it with their laptop and everything. They prefer A2I's training more than the training that they get through the textbook. So they said the aims and objectives শিখিয়েছে তাদেরকে A2I training এ and বলেছে যে ওই aims and objectives তাদের খুব পছন্দ হয় because কিভাবে পরিমাপ করা যায় সেটা কিভাবে দেখানো যায় কিন্তু কথা হচ্ছে যখন খুব সম্ভবত there's some kind of supervision from education officer কেউ একজন আসে কি ওনাদেরকে পরিদর্শন করতে একজন আসে সো পরিদর্শক আসে স্কুলে সেই পরিদর্শক যখন আসেন তখন ওই পরিদর্শক এসে বলেন আপনি কেন এইভাবে ক্লাস করাচ্ছেন এটা তো টেক্সট বুকের সাথে যাচ্ছে না এটা তো টিচার ম্যানুয়ালের সাথে যাচ্ছে না সো দে ফেস দ্যাট ওনাদের ওইভাবে উনি আমাকে যেটা বলেছিলেন যে পরিমাপযোগ্য এইম এর ব্যাপারটা যে উনি শিখেছেন ওনার খুবই ভালো লেগেছে কিন্তু উনি যখন আবার ক্লাসরুমে গিয়েছেন তখন ওই পরিদর্শক এসে বলেছে আপনি কেন এইভাবে ক্লাস নিচ্ছেন এইভাবে তো ক্লাস নেওয়ার কথা না সো আই থিঙ্ক দেয়ার ইজ আ মিসম্যাচ or miscommunication between A2I and শিক্ষা অফিসার যারা আমাদের আছেন
আমরা almost close to we have already over but I'm ready to take আমরা কি আর কোশ্চেন একটু নিব টিনা last one too
sir Rumana Rafiq probably raised her hand
Rumana Rafiq so you can Rumana I cannot see you, but you, Rumana Rafiq, you want to ask?
Hello, Rumana. How are you?
Yes, I'm fine, ma'am. How are you?
Rumana মাত্র অক্টোবরে গেল এখান থেকে তার মাস্টার্স শেষ করে।
Oh, that's great.
Educational technology তে আমার সাথে ম্যানচেস্টার ইউনিভার্সিটিতে।
Beautiful.
So I miss you, Rumana, a lot.
Yeah, me too. I missed you too, ma'am. Because we share the same field, I think I am also very interested in educational technology, and so in my dissertation, I used 2 methods, semi-structured and narrative, and I continuously faced one single problem, one single struggle. That is that because you are using Golpo, and which is more open-ended in nature, so and also you have as a researcher certain purpose in your research. So as I've said, that teachers often have lots of unheard voices. So you actually want to listen to those unheard voices. So what happens is they probably have so much to say, which might not be related to your purpose or particular aim. So how do you then handle that situation?
Oh, well, in any research, regardless of Golpo, regardless of what you're using, there will be data that you will not need. Specifically when you're constructing your theme, Saidbhai will know, but anyone else who's doing their thesis will know. You need to throw out so much of data that you need to make a discretion about. Like this is not related at all. You need to throw it out, and your supervisors. Sometimes you don't want to throw out something. Your supervisors will tell you you need to throw it out. Use it somewhere else.
You'll be so upset. You need to discuss.
It's
and as a researcher, really a challenge. You want to keep everything.
And yeah, I want to keep everything. It's my baby.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. But it's great.
Sometimes it's difficult because it's Golpo in the Bangladeshi sense, because we do talk about a lot of things. So it often becomes difficult to. Because somehow it might hurt their emotions.
Can I just try to respond to that, Ivy?
Yes, yes.
Of course, I did my PhD almost like 50 years back, so I don't want to.
No, 50 years.
So
no, 50 years.
just to one thing, I think Ivy already talked about research objective or talk about research questions. That might really help you. Because you are trying to, answer to your research question, you're addressing the research objective. So the part of that data which actually help you to solve it, answering the research questions, you understand that you really need. And schedule and unscheduled questions in an interview, and then 1 hour interview if you take. I don't know the duration of Ivy's Golpo because it seems like you did not really. Okay.
To time frame, so it went any time from 30 minutes to 2 hours.
I'm just giving you one experience. 45 to 1 hour interview, and you need to really translate and transcribe it. It takes 6 to 7 hours. It's a huge data, and then you'll be so confused. Most of the time, I think as a researcher, you need to revisit your research questions objectively, so that you can prioritize your data that you need. And I always keep the data. I just talk about children. And you can always use it in other, you can write beautiful article on that. So some
exactly.
Of these things you can use.
Rumana, we have an annual review process here where we have that third reviewer who comes in and looks at your work and tells you what to do. So Rumana, Gary, right? Mm-hmm. And he told me exactly what Saidbhai told me, that look, you have to learn to let go. Please let go of this part. And you can use it again in another paper. But according to your research questions, please, he just said, cut that off, use it somewhere else. But for your research questions, you can't use this part. They really, Diane, Gary, they all kind of helped me. Because sometimes as a researcher, you don't feel like you want to. Neither do they want to let go of any part, neither do I want to let go of any part. It's really a struggle.
Right. Okay, Afroza, do we have any more questions?
No, sir, I don't think. I can't see any more questions.
Okay, we need to really close it. With the permission from the audience, I just love to show you some picture that I promised Ivy, that though it is not directly connected to, but some of the things that is part of feelings and emotion. I'll be showing you, I'll sharing some pictures from my Facebook account. It's an old home in Kapasia. I visited last Friday, so I just wanted to show you whether it helps you understand some of the things. Can you see the pictures, please?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm just trying to show you. This is an old home that we host around 20 old people. And I've been visiting this old home. In fact, I'm the chairman of this Abdul Ali Shebasram. And that's a very emotional part of the journey that I was talking about, the stories. And then I'll just tell you some of this one. উনি হচ্ছেন, আমি নামগুলো ethical issue কারণে বলবো না, because Ivy knows that ethicality had to maintain. Ivy যখন ছবিগুলো blur করেছে, I understood যে pictures and others ethicality আছে. এখানে আমি ছবিটা দেখাচ্ছি। a old person was found somewhere on the road, left by his family members. And unfortunately, he's not in a position to speak. উনি কথা বলতে পারেন না। উনি বাক প্রতিবন্ধীও না। I think ওনার একটা নিউরোলজিক্যাল ডিসঅর্ডার হওয়ার পরে বন্ধ করে দিয়েছে। এবং ওনার গল্পটা যখন আমরা শুনি, আমাদেরকে একজন থানার ইন্সপেক্টর দিয়ে গেছেন, এবং উনি গল্পটা যখন বলেন, সবচেয়ে দুঃখজনক ওনার কোনো আইডেন্টিটি নাই। We don't know from where he came. He cannot talk about it. Then we try to find out. আমরা ফেসবুক এবং প্রত্যেকটা লোকাল থানায় দিলাম। এখন পর্যন্ত ওনার কোনো ফ্যামিলি মেম্বার ওনাকে নিতে আসে নাই। ঠিক আছে? সো আমরা we try. আমাদের এখানে একজনকে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি, ওনার এখানে ছেলে মেয়ে ওনাকে রেখে চলে গেছে। I had a long discussion with her. You know, the old women, they love to talk when you go there because they're so lonely there. ওনার গল্পটা ভয়ানক, মানে ওনাদের গল্পগুলো শুনলে আমার মাঝে মাঝে অবাক লাগে। এই স্টোরিগুলোই রিসার্চ হওয়ার মতো। ছেলেমেয়েরা দিয়ে চলে গেছেন এবং আমাদের কাছে অল ডিটেলস থাকে। When we try to reach their children, most of the time we find যে নাম্বারগুলো fake. They give us wrong numbers so that we cannot really reach them. So এটা আমার কাছে মনে হয়েছে unbelievable. The old people were living there on a wheelchair এবং parents মানে একদম সামটাইম আনবিলিভেবল যে ছেলে মেয়ে একদম রেখে চলে গেছে। সো আমার কাছে এদের গল্পগুলো মনে হয় যে কি অদ্ভুত গল্প, যেগুলি নিয়ে আমরা কথা বলি না বা বলার চেষ্টা করি না। এবং Ivy talk about local context. This is so important about local context where we try to put these people. এবং ওনাদের কেউ নেই এবং আমরা ওদের নিয়ে যখন কাজ করছি, অনেকগুলাই এনজিও এখন কাজ করছে, এবং most of the time when I visit, I don't want to even talk to them because I feel so bad when I listen to their stories. এটা একটু বলি, এটা আর্কিটেকচার পয়েন্ট অফ ভিউ, যেহেতু আইভি আরেকটা খুব সুন্দর কথা বলেছে যে গল্প কেন ইউজ করেছে, ভেরি লোকাল, ইটস আওয়ার ওন, মানে আমাদের বাঙালি সংস্কৃতির একটা অংশ। এটা একটা মাটির বাড়ি, দোতলা বাড়ি, পুরোটাই মাটি দিয়ে বানানো। আমরা যারা গাজীপুর বা কাপাসিয়ার দিকে জানি, ইটস বিউটিফুল যে এই এত সাস্টেইনেবল মডেল করা যায় উইথ দ্য লোকাল মেটেরিয়ালস। আমরা তো সারা জীবন ওয়েস্টার্ন এখন আর্কিটেক্ট বিল্ডিং গুলো হয় হচ্ছে হাই রাইজ এন্ড আদার্স। সো I got two friends from Buet, they will do something about it. আমরা এটা ভেঙে টেঙে নতুন কিছু করব। First thing they said, this is such a beautiful, it represents local culture, we need to preserve it. আমার প্ল্যান ছিল একে চেঞ্জ করা। The moment they came, they said no, this is the heart of this বৃদ্ধাশ্রম, এটা হচ্ছে লোকাল, এটা হচ্ছে একটা মাটির বাড়ি। এবং দেখলে অনেকে মনে করবে সিমেন্ট, নো, ইটস জাস্ট মাটি দিয়ে তৈরি এবং উপরে হচ্ছে উডেন, কাঠ এবং মাটি বাঁশ দিয়ে তৈরি করা। That is so important even in our research, I think, highlighting the local context, our own methodology. That also, you know, Professor Amar Mahbub from University, he has been talking about so much breaking away from the Western framework and coming up with our own framework. So with that note, আসলে আমি একটু just share করতে চেয়েছিলাম। I just hope just a emotional journey একটু দেখাতে চেয়েছিলাম যে what we do and how we can really do it. So from my side, just a sharing about the old home. And
that was a very beautiful story, Said Bhai. Yeah. So I'd like to know more about their stories, what they say, how they came here. So
yes,
if you wrote their stories,
once you come back, we'll visit, and we need because you're talking about the sociological perspective and the research that you're doing.
Yeah.
One thing that I really love the argument from Professor Amar Mahbub. He has been talking about impact of our research. What do we do? Does it really change the society? So for example, if it is about COVID, are you doing something to change the society, transformation? Our immediate concerns. If I look at my PhD, shut down and nobody really read it second. I did not. When you submit Ivy, I can guarantee you, you'll not read it twice. Once you submit, I don't know what Jamil says. I don't feel like to read again because once it is done, dusted, and you'd love to do.
I'm tired. I'm completely tired of it.
So what is the impact of my study? And that's so important at this moment. The research that will change, transform the society. We need to look at research that can create an impact on an immediate environment, in immediate issues that you are doing wonderfully, the ICT thing. And then I think I love the concept, and I'm really kind of already plan to use your methodology in my coming paper. And of course, referring back to your presentation, such a wonderful presentation. I learned so much from you.
I learned from everyone, and it's really like engaging with everyone.
Thank you. It was really a golpo.
In my mind.
Really a golpo, and অনেকটা হচ্ছে রবীন্দ্রনাথের ভাষা শেষ করতে হতে পারে যে ছোট ছোট গল্প শেষ হইয়াও হইল না শেষ। কাপের আড্ডা চলতে থাকবে এবং আমি রিকোয়েস্ট করব যাদের এনি টাইম you want to contact us to organize any kind of event like this, আমরা যে কাউকে ডাকবো পরবর্তী চায়ের কাপের আড্ডায় আমন্ত্রণ থাকলো। আমাদের মেম্বারশিপ রাকিব বলেছে আমাদের মেম্বারশিপ ড্রাইভ আমরা দিয়েছি, ইট ইজ অলরেডি গোয়িং অন, ভেরি গুড। আমাদের আরো অনেক ইভেন্ট আসছে, সো আমরা সবাইকে অনেক ধন্যবাদ এরকম চায়ের গল্পের জন্য আবার আমন্ত্রণ রইল।
I definitely want to thank all the participants because it's been 2 long hours. We understand you were patient. So I would like to invite in our 4th academic Adda once again. So see you over there. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Taslima ma'am.
Bye. Bye. Thank you, everyone.